Hello again, Struck. Yesterday, Diablo 4 developers had one more campfire chat again regarding some of the upcoming changes for Diablo 4 patch or update 1.1.1. And they showed some teases. Actually, a lot of teases about a lot of things, about mostly Sorcerer and Barbarian, but also for the other classes in general, non-class specific. There will be changes to unique items, there will be balances to skills, passives, Paragons, Legendaries, and all of those things for all the classes. There will be changes to one actually malignant heart, and changes to density, and they did show us some of that. Obviously, the full patch notes preview will be coming on the 2nd of August, and the actual patch would be coming in one of those two dates. In the stream, they set the 12th of August for the actual patch. But on various news outlets, I'm seeing the 8th of August as the date when the actual patch would land. The 8th seems like a more plausible because the 12th is a Saturday, and I thought they would do it on a Saturday. Whether the patch comes on the 8th or the 12th, time will tell, but the patch notes, full patch notes with everything, will be for sure coming on the 2nd of August. Well, at least for now, that's what we know. So buckle up. I hope you enjoy me going through all of those changes in that video. And let's go. What they're doing when changing the stats of uniques. Because, you would have certain uniques already that would have their stats changed. But to give you an example, Blizzard have used the Hellhammer. The Hellhammer is having two changes done to it. First of all, they're increasing the effectiveness of the unique power, unique/legendary power at the bottom, where Upheaval ignites the ground, burning enemies for additional XYZ flat damage over X seconds. So they're increasing this flat damage, and if I'm not mistaken, the 4 seconds used to be less before. So they're increasing that. And this would already be on your items when the patch comes. This would happen immediately, this change. Whereas there's another thing that they're changing to this item. They're changing the damage to crowd-controlled enemies for critical strike damage. A very nice change. For this one, you would have to find a new Hellhammer. So Hellhammers you already have would get the flat bonuses to Upheaval as a change, but they would not get the already wrote on it affix of crowd control, damage to crowd controlled enemies be replaced to critical strike damage. But any new item after the bonuses, after the rerolls, after the changes, will have the crit strike damage on it, as well as the additional changes to that. And this is the rule that would apply to every single unique item. So if you have a unique item where they have multiple changes, including stats affix rerolls added to it, well, the affix rerolls only to new drops, but flat bonus to the unique legendary power and any other bonus to the legendary unique power will be there to the currently owned versions of those items. So for the Sorcerer, there's all sorts of changes: skills, passives, paragons, legendaries, uniques. First of all, let's go through the changes for the skills. In terms of skills, flickering firebolt will now generate mana when hitting an enemy rather than hitting a burning enemy. If I'm not mistaken, was the old one. Firebow, enhanced firebow now changes to casting firebow increases its radius by 50%. And destructive firebow changes to firebow's critical strike damage is increased by 20%. Now, this bonus is increased to 30% if Firebow hits 3 or more enemies. Regarding Chain Lightning, Greater Chain Lightning changes to each time Chain Lightning bounces, its next hit deals 5% increased damage. It no longer needs to bounce off of you, which is amazing, especially for mob clearing. It is definitely nice. The more it bounces, the more the damage, regardless whether it's off of you like before. Then destructive chain lightning chance to form crackling energy is increased from 25 to 30%. The next change is for the passives. Starting with Verse Mastery, damage bonus is increased from 10 to 15%, which is pretty nice. That's like a 50% increase of that bonus. Then Asus Ferocity, both bonuses are also granted for 3 seconds when hitting a boss with a critical strike. This would be an interesting thing to see in some builds. Then Combustion. Change to your burning effects deal multiplicative 20% increased damage plus an additional 2% multiplicative increased damage per unique source of burning you have applied to the enemy, which is pretty solid. Regarding Searing Heat, the legendary node, changes to casting Fireball or Meteor increases your critical strike chance by 5% for 5 seconds up to 15%. If I'm not mistaken, this one used to be only Meteor, and now there's also Fireball too. Now, Ceaseless Conduit, legendary note, increase crackling energies damage from 2% to 3% per 20 in the intelligence the player has, which again, this is, it might seem like a single percent, but that's actually 50% more than what used to be there before, which is a big bump. There's a reinforced rare glyph damage reduction increase from 10 to 15%. Territorial rare glyph damage reduction increase from 10 to 15%. Warding rare glyph damage reduction from 13 to 25%, almost double there. And then Keeper of Flames rare note damage reduction bonus is increased from 4% to 5%, and bonus damage reduction increased from 4% to 5%. Then moving on, we have Smoldering Embers rare note. Damage reduction from burning enemies increased from 4 to 5%. Bonus damage reduction from burning enemies increased from 4 to 5%. The Guarded rare note. Damage reduction from vulnerable enemies increased from 4 to 5%. And bonus damage reduction from vulnerable enemies increased from 4 to 5%. Oppressive rare note. Damage reduction from vulnerable enemies increased from 4 to 5% as well. And there's the Lightning Resilience rare note and the Restorative rare note, which have their maximum life bonus increased from 4 to 6%. Now, regarding Sorc Legendaries, the Serpentine aspect has this following change. You may have one additional Hydra active, and Hydra's duration, instead of being decreased, is increased by 14 to 24%. And this now also affects the Hydra's enhancement effect, which is pretty massive. Not having that negative effect, but rather just having positives. Hopefully, we get to see more of those. Well, we do get to see more of those, but hopefully more than what they showed in those previews. So for aspect of configuration, bonus burning damage increased from 30 to 20 to 40%. The aspect of engulfing flames, bonus burning damage increased from the old 30-40 to the new 60-80%, which is like a double of what we had before. Aspect of three curses. This is again a big change because it's increasing the crit strike damage of not just Meteor but also Fireball. So Meteor and Fireball crit damage by 20 to 40% crit strike damage increase. Double this bonus against healthy enemies. Flamewalker's aspect bonus movement speed duration increase from 4 to 6%. The gravitational aspect changes to bow lightning orbits around you and deal 15-25% increased damage. Then the recharging aspect changes to each time chain lightning bounces, you gain 2 to 3 mana. Aspect of Unbroken Tether, bonus chain lightning bounces increase from 2 to 4, which is a 100% increase of those bonus bounces. And if you combine that with the extra damage per each bounce, that means you can get extra 2 times 5% more damage for those 2 extra bounces, which is amazing for chain lightning builds. Charged aspect bonus movement speed duration increase from 4 to 8 seconds, very nice. Aspect of the bounding conduit, the bonus movement speed increase from 20-25% to 25-30%. So they really want to get that build where you get more damage based on your more crit based on your movement speed be viable. I'm hoping it ends up being one eventually. And here is this one, new legendary, Mage Ward's aspect, which is massive legendary. I am loving this one. The Verse Mastery, key passive's damage reduction is increased by 20-30% for each close enemy, up to 60-90%. So with three enemies, you get the maximum bonus on it, and getting 60-90% is massive. And even if you're doing a single boss fight, single enemy boss fight, or single enemy elite champion, whatever, that's still 20-30% bonus damage reduction. On top of the Verse Mastery passive damage reduction. Then aspect of Frozen Orbit, the damage is increased from 20-30% to 30-40%. And then Stormswell aspect, bonus damage increase from 11-20 to 21-30. The Snowbelt, that's percentages. The Snowbelt aspect, the unstoppable duration increase from 2-3 seconds to 3-5 seconds. Additional functionality is added, granting 10% bonus armor for 3-5 seconds as well, which is pretty solid. Incendiary aspect changes to the Wacky hit damage from your pyromancy skills, has up to 12-17 chance to restore 10 mana. And keep in mind, this now says pyromancy skills rather than what it was before. I think it was burning skills or burning damage. So instead of burning damage has up to X chance to restore mana, it's damage from your pyromancy skills, which opens it up across the board for all sorts of fire damage skills, regardless whether it's damage over time or a direct damage like Meteor and Fireball, for example. Nogart's aspect changes to WoW within your own blizzard for 2 seconds, and for 2 seconds after leaving it, you take 20-25% less damage. If I'm not mistaken, this one was 10-15 or something like that less damage, and definitely good bump there for blizzard builds. Aspect of concentration, mana regeneration is increased from 20-30% to 40-50%, and the duration requirement to gain its benefit reduced from 3 to 2 seconds. Regarding uniques for the Sorc, there is only one change. I'm not sure if it's good enough, but Ghost of the Illuminator, the damage reduction the penalty to the damage of Fireball, that the reduction to that damage used to be 65-55% with the latest patch, but it's going to be 45-35%. And yet, it still feels like with a single cast of the Ghost of the Illuminator, sure you would get triple Fireball projectiles, but in the best case, that's 35% less damage for each of them. Again, it feels still kind of unreasonable, but okay, let's say maybe they've tested this in high tier content and they can see the damage being reasonable and worth it. They've also done changes to the stunt damage to stunt affix being replaced with Wacky Hit chance to restore resource, and then they reduce the distance offset per bounce from 3 to 2.5. So this way, with this distance offset, that means some enemies would be actually hit by at least 2 bounces of the fireball rather than just a single time. Hopefully this happens, especially on big bosses. Maybe you can even get 3 hits rather than 1 as before, or 2. And this should make it easier to hit close enemies with fireball. So hopefully the damage really is reasonable with that still existing negative damage reduction to the damage for the sake of getting the 3 projectiles. Hopefully fireball builds actually become viable for late game, end game with those changes and the other changes we've seen to various aspects and stuff. Next up, we have changes to the Barbarian skills, which in general Bash, Flay, Frenzy, and Lunging Strike have had their Fury generation increased. It might seem like small numbers, but look at the percentage. For example, Fury is 30% increase from 10 to 13 on Flay. The Fury gain is increased from 11 to 13, again almost 30%, 20 something percent there for Bash. For Frenzy, it's a whopping 50% increase from 2 to 3. The Fury gained for Enhanced Frenzy. Lunging Strike, Fury gained increase from 10 to 12, that's 20% increase. Then you have Double Swing. Damage, that's the base damage. The base damage is increased from 40 to 50% weapon damage or whatever, which again, that's a quarter of the old damage, 25% of the old damage more. Rupture from 45 to 70. That's another massive whopping increase for the base damage. And Charge's base damage is pretty much doubled from 30 to 60% of what it used to do. And then Mighty Charge vulnerable duration is increased from 2 to 4 seconds. And then for Upheaval, we have Violent Upheaval, having bonuses to if Upheaval damages at least 2 enemies or a boss, you gain Berserking for 2 seconds, which is increased to 3 seconds if it damages at least 4 enemies. Again, pretty nice changes there. There are some things to consider. For example, aggressive resistance, the damage reduction is increased from 3 to 4%. Gushing Wounds, the bleed damage dealt based on crit damage bonus is increased from 100 to 115%, so easy to tell, 15% increase there. And the bleeding damage when overpowering is increased from a whopping, it's a whopping change from 11 to 70%. This is amazing increase from 11 to 70%, almost 7 times the old additional bleed damage when overpowering for Gushing Wounds. Now, Unconstrained, Berserking damage bonus is increased from 25 to 35% and updated the tooltip to more clearly reflect this key passive's value. Then Walking Arsenal, the bonus damage duration increased from 6 to 8 seconds, which again, it would allow for more windows of opportunity to get all those 3 bonuses. Getting 3 bonuses from Walking Arsenal, not as easy as it might seem on the majority of builds. You have to sacrifice certain things if using certain skills. to use that walking arsenal. This would definitely help with some overpower related, overpower focused builds if they want to go in the walking arsenal route. Changes to some legendaries for the barb. For example, aspect of ancestral force, the damage increased from 30 to 50% to 40 58. If I'm not mistaken, this one was the one for the hot build with the quake there, with the extra shockwave or whatever of the hot. Then Death Wish aspect tones is increased from 0.5, 0.75 to 0.65, 0.85. Aspect of Unrelenting Fury, the core skill cost to refund increased from 10-20 to 20-30%. Additional functionality, cost refund also granted when hitting bosses, which was much needed. Aspect of Ancestral Charge, damage increased from 50-100% to 75-125%. Then aspect of Burning Rage, damage increased from 0.20 to 0.28 to 0.3, 0.38. Then the Earthquakes, 4 Bukatus have been buffed up. The damage reduction while in Earthquakes increased from 515 to 1525%. Very solid. And the Earthquake aspect, damage bonus in Earthquakes increased from 515 to 1525. Hopefully this makes taking those aspects in the late end game actually worth it rather than trash as they were before. Now changes to the uniques of the barb. Fields of Crimson, damage increased from 0.18, 0.34 to 0.22, 0.38. Damage that enemies take standing impulse increased from 15 to 20%. And the Rupture cooldown reduction affix is replaced with bonus crit strike damage. I did like the Rupture cooldown reduction, but I guess they won't let us have as much Rupture as we want to. The biggest problem with Rupture was the fucking cooldown. And now, sure, I love bonus crit strike damage, but I'd much rather get the bonus crit strike damage and the cooldown reduction, but have some of the other stuff removed from it. But hopefully this item becomes more viable now that at least they've added certain buffs and added crit damage to it. Even considering the nerfs to cooldown reduction across the board, this one including. For Hellhammer, we already showed you images at the beginning, but yeah, damage increased from 0.6, 0.8 to 0.85, 1.1. So more flat damage pretty much, as you saw earlier. The burning duration increased from 3 to 4 seconds, and the damage to crowd controlled enemies affix replaced with bonus crit strike damage. The Bloodness Magnum Opus, the physical damage affix replaced with vulnerable damage, which is pretty cool. And 100,000 steps attacks reduce evades cooldown affix is replaced with bonus evade charges. Definitely good there. And the damage against stunt affix replaced with bonus movement speed. So definitely another good change there. And then here is a massive good change to keep in mind. Battle Trance. The basic skill damage affix is replaced with cooldown reduction on that amulet. And the bonus attack speed to other skills increased from 10-20% to 35-45%. Big change there. Now changes to the rogue, we have skills. Changes such as Invigorating Strike, Fundamental Invigorating Strike, Energy Threshold increase from 50 to 75%. And Forceful Arrow, Primary Forceful Arrow change to every third cast pierces enemies. And Enhanced Caltrops, the damage bonus is increased from 3 to 5%, which is almost double. And Poison Trap, and the damage per tick is increased from 0.0956 to 0.12. Rain of Arrows, the Supreme Rain of Arrows is changing, and Rain of Arrows' first wave now knocks down enemies for 3 seconds instead of the second one. Now, regarding the rogue passives, as well as some legendary changes, Victimize. The Wookiee hit chance is increased from 35 to 45%, and the Rugged passive, which gives you damage reduction against damage over time effects, is increased from 6, 12, 18 to 9, 18, 27 for the first, second, and third rank. Then Siphoning Strikes, the Wookiee hit chance is increased from 75 to 85. Keep in mind, this didn't even have a Wookiee hit chance prior to the previous patch. It used to happen all the time. But they changed it from happening all the time, requiring to a Wookiee hit chance of 75%. Obviously, it wasn't working well. It felt like a massive nerf. And I guess they're increasing that 75% to 85% chance. I still think it would be better if it just doesn't have a Wookiee hit chance and it was as it used to be. Regarding legendaries here, aspect of Elusive Menace. No longer requires hits to be from close enemies, which is amazing change there. An aspect of Quickening Fog changed to You automatically drop a smoke grenade at the end of dash. Smoke grenades reduce dash's cooldown by 0.4, 0.6 seconds per target hit, up to 2-3 seconds. There's some stuff for Wind Force that they did. All stats affixes on Wind Force are replaced with vulnerable damage, which is a good change. And then for Word of Hakan or Hakan, whatever the pronunciation is, that amulet, the ultimate damage affix is replaced with cooldown reduction, which is definitely more um, it's more within line of it modifying an ultimate skill such as Rain of Arrows. I'd much rather have more cooldown across the board, which of course would affect the ultimate, but other things too, than that ultimate damage that would only affect an ultimate, which already has a long cooldown. So a massive boost there, in my opinion, to making me wanna use Word of Hakan compared to before. Now with the Druid, starting with changes to the skills, just like the Barbarian, you can see across the board changes to resource generation. So Earth Spike from 11 to 13, Quo 11 to 12, Storm Strike 14 to 15, Wind Share 13 to 14, and Mow 15 to 17 Spirit generation increases. Then for the Wolves, the passive damage is increased from 7.8 to 11%. The active damage is increased from 110 to 135%. Enhanced Wolf Pack damage bonus increased from 20 to 25%. Brutal Wolf Pack attack speed bonus increased from 20 to 25%. And the Ferocious Wolf Pack, the fortify amount is increased from 5 to 8%. Then we also have bonuses to the Ravens. The passive damage, the passive damage is increased from 13 to 20%. And for Brutal Ravens, the additional functionality is added, increases the passive damage of Ravens by 40%. Then also rabies. Damage over time is increased from 76% to 110%. Now, there's some changes to Druid Legendaries as well as one change to one Druid class mechanic. Let's go through the Legendaries first. Aspect of Metamorphic Stone. The spirit cost is reduced from 60 to 50. I still think that that needs to be reduced even further. 60 feels like a massive fucking nerf, considering you're already sacrificing an aspect to make Boulder a core skill. And none of the core skills on none of the classes costs 50. 60 was already super shitty, but this shouldn't be higher than 36, 37, maybe 38 at best as a cost. Because again, you are sacrificing a fucking aspect to get Boulder to be a core skill. And it just doesn't feel like a core skill. It feels like you're casting. It feels like it costs twice the cost of a core skill, and it doesn't do twice the damage of a core skill. Yes, you can end up steamrolling an enemy and hitting it multiple times with a single cast of Boulder, and not just one, but multiple ones. Still, some core skills are much more effective for much less cost. It's a step in the right direction, but we need one more step. At least make it 40. At least make it 40 rather than the current 50. Still a good change from 60 to 50 though. The damage dealt is increased from 800 to 120%. Again, good thing there. But again, it still needs less spirit cost than it currently has, because it becomes very difficult to make this thing really viable, even with full synergies. Aspect of the alpha. Damage increased from 7500 to 90, 115%. And mangled aspect resource gain increased from 1 to 3%, which is triple of what it did. Hopefully this really helps, especially in the early levels when Druid feels sluggish. And for the quest mechanic that got changes, it's overload. The working hit chances increased from 20 to 40%. For the Necro, we have not that many, but still some nice changes. For the skills, Bone Spirit, the enhanced Bone Spirit cooldown reduction is increased from 6 to 7 seconds when that thing happens, when it procs. And for Paragons, the Wither legendary board, it's changed that the willpower requirement for bonuses are reduced from 50 to 40, and the bonus damage per 40 willpower is increased from 2.5 to 4%. This should help with some of those damage over time, shadow damage over time builds across the board. Now, regarding changes to legendaries for the Necro, we have Aspect of Empowering Creeper changing to damaging enemies with Sever has 10-20% chance to spawn a pool of blight under the target that deals 20 to 60% bonus damage. This effect can only happen once every 3 seconds. This seems like a very fun change, and maybe it would be very interesting to make a build around that one now compared to before. Aspect of exposed flesh changes to Wiki hits up to a 10% chance to generate 30 to 50 essence when hitting a vulnerable enemy. Then the aspect of decay. The damage is increased from 40% to 45%. Minor increase, but still not so bad. Aspect of torment change to essence regeneration increase from 2030 to 90-170%. Massive increase here. It's more than 3 times, almost 5 times of what it was before. In fact, the maximum is more than 5 times. The minimum is less than 5 times of what it used to be. This hopefully helps a lot for various builds out there to keep essence, to not rely on just corpse explosion for essence generation. Then hooking aspect, legendary category change from resource to utility, which I've noticed even before the game launched, and I thought it was a mistake, and then the game launched, and the data mined info was confirmed that this was really a resource. It made no sense. Thankfully, they're finally making it utility, so it can go in more than rings. And then chance for golem to reduce its cooldown increase from 2 to 5%, and the chance for golem to spawn a corpse increase from 0.52% to a 2.5%. And then there's changes to the unique boots, Griefs of the Empty Tomb. Intelligence suffix is replaced with bonus movement speed, finally, and good news for Necrus using a unique boots option like the Griefs of the Empty Tomb. And now there's some general changes to monsters that actually affect the Druid companions and the Necromancer minions. The following attacks now would deal reduced damage to the Necro minions and the Druid companions. For the Balrog, the Fire Breath, a very annoying attack that melts. It used to melt, hopefully doesn't now. Minions and the elite affixes such as Fire Enchanted, Electrified Obelisks, and Shock Ones. Yes, those definitely did a lot of damage to players. So they probably still do a lot of damage to players, but thankfully minions won't get melted in seconds from those. Hopefully with this change. Regarding balance changes to Malignant Hearts, other than what came with the previous patch, there is one change they showed us. The Caged Heart of Spellbreaking is having this change done to it. Upon taking elemental damage, gain a 10-20% damage reduction for 5 seconds. So this is interesting because again, if I'm not mistaken, this used to be taking damage, taking less damage, gain damage reduction for that element. Now you gain general damage reduction, which thankfully is more viable now for Sorcs. Now, regardless of what element they hit you with, you still get general damage reduction to everything. I could see people actually starting to use this now. And another general change that was done is for the Temerity unique pants item. The bonus all stats affix is replaced with maximum life. And the barrier that it grants is now based on maximum life. So on leg armor, having that maximum life, sure, it's not as good as damage reduction affix, but it's still better considering the nature of this item being healing and granting barrier and stuff like that. And now it properly accounts to certain conditions, checking for the player having a barrier, which means you would have more things to trigger the temerity, and this should increase its effectiveness across the board. Testing would need to be done to this to see if it really is enough to just give it some max life and base the barrier on max life and fix those things that check the conditions. Hopefully it's enough because the temerity as an idea, as a fantasy behind this item doesn't feel bad, but later on it felt very whacking to use, especially now with the changes to damage reduction across the board and those nerfs. I'm not sure it would be enough to make people want to use this item. Hopefully it is, but most likely it won't. Now, another thing Blizzard showed us in that campfire chat was the changes they've done to mob density. What you're seeing right now is the pre-density buff example of a dungeon, in this case Mustrava Deepwood. So this is what it looks like after the buff. Now just go pre-buff, after the buff. Obviously the mobs won't always be in the exact same positions, but since they move around here and there, but generally it seems like almost double the density of mobs. In fact, I think it's more than double. I think if this is 100%, this feels like 130, 140%. 200 and 240. So if this is 100, this is 230 and 240. It feels like 140, 130% increase of the alt one from the looks of it. I haven't counted every single dot, but I think that's roughly it from the looks of it generally. So this is not going to be just for this dungeon. Obviously, they're doing that across the board. They're doing that to health tight areas and so on. That's just one example. So will patch 1.1.1 be enough for us, for some of us that stopped playing the game until that patch, until they make the game more fun, and at least as fun as it used to be? Hopefully that patch is enough. I'm still skeptical, but I will test it when the patch comes, when I find some time, and see if the game is worth coming back to.
To get notified when I upload more content like this one or other builds and guides for Wooter and not so Wooter games, you can subscribe to my channel and hit that bell button to not miss out on notifications. As well as keep in mind there's something called memberships on YouTube, which lets you be a paying member for my channel to get access to perks such as emotes and badges made by me, as well as the option to get one-on-one tutoring for the very basics of Adobe Photoshop, Premiere and After Effects. And memberships can be cancelled at any time if you no longer wanna be a member. Thanks for watching all the way until the end, Struck Web. Keep it cool until next time and goodbye.